This is the first video in a series of videos going over how to program using the Arduino. The Arduino is a microcontroller commonly used for making prototypes for various projects. This series is going to focus on the programming or coding aspect of using the Arduino and somewhat ignore the wiring or electronic aspects. Whenever we do need to wire up the Arduino, I'll go ahead and provide you with pictures and/or schematics showing you how to do so. In this first video, we're going to go over how to download the Arduino software, what a sketch is, and a general overview of how a sketch is run in the Arduino software. The first thing that we're going to need to do is go to www.arduino.cc, and when we get there, we're going to go up to the top here and click on Software. And then under Download the Arduino IDE, we're going to click whichever link here is appropriate to our operating system. So I have Windows. I'm going to click with a Windows installer. And just click Just Download. If you find yourself later on in life being very pleased with the Arduino, you can go ahead and make a contribution. But then this thing pops up and we're going to hit Run. And so this is going to download. Once that's done, we're going to have to install it. During the installation process, it's going to ask us to install some drivers. Just hit OK, that's fine. And then once that's done, we're going to go ahead and open up the Arduino software and look at our first sketch. Alright, so I've got the Arduino software downloaded and installed, and I've started to run the program, and when I do that, this window opened up, which is a new sketch. And before doing anything else, I want to go to File and Preferences, and definitely click Display Line Numbers. This is going to display a number for each line in our code, and this will be very helpful when we compile our code and receive errors. The errors are going to point us to what line the error is occurring on, or around which the error is occurring, and it's going to help us fix our code. And I'm also going to increase the font size so it's a little bit easier for us to read. And we can see here now we've got these line numbers on the left column. Now whenever we open up a new sketch, there's always going to be two things that are there. These two functions, void setup and void loop. The void setup is a function which is going to be run one time, and inside of this function we're going to initialize things. We're going to declare certain variables. We might tell the Arduino that a certain pin is going to be an input or an output, and so forth. And we'll see specific examples of that in later videos. And then inside the void loop function, we're going to be putting the main portion of our code, and it's going to be something that's going to be run repeatedly over and over again. And to see kind of how that works, I want to talk very briefly about how the Arduino actually runs a sketch. And what the Arduino is going to do when we run the sketch is it's going to run the code line by line. So if there were anything written on line 1, it would do that first, and then it would go to line 2, and it would execute whatever's on line 2, then line 3, line 4, line 5, line 6, line 7, and so forth, until it gets to void loop. And when it gets to void loop, it's going to do the same thing. It's going to run line 10, line 11, say line 12, line 13. But then once it gets to the end of that void loop, it's going to revert back to the top of the void loop. And so it'll go back to line 10, then 11, then 12, then 13. And it's going to loop over and over again indefinitely. So it's important to know that when we're running our Arduino code, it's going to be something that's going to be doing the same thing over and over and again forever, or until we unplug our Arduino code. And I want to point out, with these functions, we have these curly brackets. So we can see this open curly bracket here and a corresponding closed curly bracket. For any function, especially here void setup and void loop, we have to put our code in between those two curly brackets. And if those curly brackets aren't there, the code will not run. The next thing I want to point out to you are these things here, this text that's in gray. This gray text here indicates that it's a comment. And we also know it's a comment by these double slashes. The comment is something that the Arduino is going to ignore when it gets to that line. So we can use comments to make notes for ourselves about what that line of code is supposed to be doing, or what the whole code in general is intended to do. So these are just notes for our purposes, and for other people's purposes if they're going to be reading your code. Another type of comment that we can make is a block comment. So if we do a /*, we get this whole block here is a comment. And whenever we create a new sketch, we're going to want to create a block comment at the top of our code, documenting a little bit about the code. So we're going to want to say, first of all, who this is created by. And we're also going to want to say the date it was created. And when we're writing code, it's going to be good to give a description of what the code is supposed to do. So just a short blurb describing what the code is meant to do. Now, another thing that I want to mention to you is something that's called syntax. So syntax is very analogous to grammar for a spoken language. So think of like the English language, for example. In the English language, we have things like commas, periods, quotation marks, things like that. We also have sentence structure and so forth. When it comes to a programming language, the syntax is very much like the grammar of a spoken language. And if the syntax is not correct, then the code is not going to run. Very much like if the grammar is incorrect in a sentence, you look at it and it makes no sense. If the syntax is incorrect, then it's going to make no sense to the computer. And all of the syntax has to be correct. In order to check and make sure the syntax is correct, we can always go up to this check mark here in the top left corner of the window, and we can see that it says verify. And when we click this button, it's going to verify that the syntax of our code is correct. And if there's any syntax errors, it's going to pop up an error, and it's going to indicate some message trying to tell us what that error is so that we can correct it. And then once we are sure that we have no syntax errors, we can then go ahead and hit this arrow, and upload the code to our Arduino, which will actually run the code. And again, it's going to repeat whatever's in the loop over and over and over again. So this has been the first video introducing you how to download the Arduino software, and just some brief understanding of what a sketch is and how the Arduino runs the sketch. I hope you found this useful, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.